remember the days when someone could be wrong. I remember the days when thinking out loud won't get you shot down. I remember the ways we used to call out, hey, hey, hey. So don't forget to call on me to disagree. So don't forget to call on me to disagree. You now reduce them to the evil you once agreed. You now reduce them to be silenced you once agreed. So don't forget to call on me to disagree. So don't forget to call on me, yeah, to disagree. Your ship is sailing on. I see you on the horizon. Your ship is sailing on. I see you sailing on the horizon. Call on me when you wanna disagree. Please call on me when you wanna disagree. You now reduce them to be silenced you once agreed. You and I are predetermined nonsense, and that's okay. You and I have predetermined consequence, and that's okay. And that's okay. That's that's okay.
Nothing seems to go right. Melodies don't sound right. It's true. Days disappear. Shadows remain plainly clear. The door opens, and the fizzing in my beer slows. The door opens as it slows. I see a shade of something moving like a blanket in the wind. A pretty little blanket, perfect to heal me in the end. The door opens, and the fizzing in my beard slows. She walks by, and the spinning in my head grows. The door opens as it slows. I wish that I was pretty, more pretty than reflections look tonight. But I'm past the point of caring. It's time to make a moment. Let's not make a moment. This shouldn't be a moment. The door opens, and the fizzing in my beer slows. She walks by, the spinning in my head grows. When the door opens, and the fizzing in my beer slows. As she walks by, oh, she walks by, the spinning in my head grows. Watch it grow, watch it go. The door opens, and it slows. Closing sale, everything must go, nothing left behind, no wild oats to sow. So out of my way, I'm done now. You see, you took the meat, but not my bones. Now throw away your key. 1 foot out the door, persistent. You are frozen in time,
Oh, I love you slips out of my mind. So sail, set sail, a little bird. Just go and set sail. Set sail, set sail, a little bird. Just go and set sail. I'll take my ship away as the storm rolls in. I hope the wind is with me, and I hope you've learned that the pirate within me is sworn to the truth. Live or die by this rule. Something old and something new is the treasure within me. As sad as it seems, you will come to know what it all means to me. Set sail, little bird. Just go and set sail. Set sail, set sail, little bird. You just go now and set sail. Some pictures and some memories, ones I can't forget, on the crest of my black heart. You best not forget that the pirate never loses. He always collects one way or another. Now you can clear up all your regrets of the time you set sail with that pirate from the sky. You will remember him until that day that you die. Set sail, little bird. Now come on, just set sail. Set sail, little bird. Now I want you to set sail. Set sail, oh, little bird. Now I want you to set sail. Don't forget to lose your mind tonight. Just watch me. Hello. Don't you think about responsibilities. Just feel what you want. Feel what you want tonight. I want you to say how you feel. I want you to tell me I'm no good. We'll send you on your way if you say so. You try to, but you see me staring back at you. I'm staring back at you. So have another dance with me, my dear. Move your hips like this. It's clear I'm what you need. As a tear falls down, I want you to say how you feel. I want you to tell me I'm no good. Well, don't you look back, you miss me. just walk to me, my dear. Look inside me and it's clear I'm a better man than him. I'm a better man than him. Then time stops. I want you to say how you feel. I want you to tell me I'm no good. Well, don't you look back, you will miss me. Don't look back, I'm standing under the street light at night. Don't you look back, try to forget. Yeah. So just walk to me, my dear. Look inside me and it's clear I'm a better man than him. I'm a better man than him. Then time stops. It's the same road as before, and I wonder who I'll see this time. Just to touch the water and swing through the trees. Home is at memory away. Take me home. Take me home. Take me home. Take me home. Come to think of it, I've never felt so free. My tunes are a blaring, consuming that mountain breeze. Makes me so grateful to be alive. Home is a memory away. Take me home. Take me home. Take me home. Please take me home. Come on. Please take me home. Please take me You and I are predetermined nonsense, and that's okay. You and I have predetermined predetermined consequence, and that's okay. And that's okay. You and I are locked into our destiny, and that's okay. And that's okay. You gotta know what you want. You gotta know what you want. You gotta know what you want. Look out. You gotta know what you want. Look out. You gotta know what you want. You gotta know what you want. You and I, friends telling nonsense. You gotta, and that's okay. You gotta know what you want. Look out. You gotta know what you want. 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 You gotta, and that's okay. You gotta know what you want. Look out. You gotta know what you want. Look out. And I are predetermined nonsense. Have predetermined consequence. You and that's okay. You and I, friends telling nonsense. Look out, and that's okay. You gotta know what you want. You gotta know what you You and I are locked into our destiny, and that's okay. And that's okay.
We need to be able to have conversations without feeling like we're going to say something that gets us thrown in jail because people happen to be offended.
Skepticism. Do you know what you believe?
All right, dudes, we are back with another Pangburn Hangout. Today we are talking about, well, we're dealing with this question. We're dealing with torture today. Who wants to get tortured? Is torture ever ethical? Let me know what you guys think. If you're not sticking around for the entire conversation, I hope you do. Please drop your comment down in the comment section. Let us know what you think. Is torture ever ethical? I'm going to open up the room here, see what we're doing.
An ideal partner. All I'm saying is I'm not going to take the risk. That's all I'm saying.
What up, my dudes?
Hey.
Hey, we are live again. Is torture ever ethical? We're just waiting on Eliyahu. He's going to be running this conversation today. Guys, those of you who are already in the chat, please engage in the text chat on YouTube. Really helps out the algorithm. But yeah, this should be interesting. Torture. I just watched that. I rewatched that video of Christopher Hitchens getting waterboarded. That's got to be one of the most badass things a intellectual's ever done.
Steven Crowder did it too. I thought that was funny.
Oh, did he? I haven't seen his.
Yeah. Yeah, he did. A while ago. Quite a long while ago.
I'm going to have to watch that one. I want to see that.
I've done it.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
How was
in
it?
College. So it feels like you're drowning.
Is self-torture? Does self-torture count?
Well, that's the thing. Like, is it torture if it's self-inflicted and you're doing it for pleasure's sake?
Then no.
It's kind of just masturbation at that point.
Yeah, it's pleasure is not torture. It's the opposite.
Mm.
The problem is the definition of all these terms is relative. That's the issue you're going to run into no matter what topic you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to stick with the colloquial term. Otherwise, it's a waste of time.
Yeah. And Eliyahu will lay out the parameters for that. And we can also explore, if there are competing usages, we can also explore both. Nothing wrong with that.
There may be some, but I can't think of too many.
We just have to clarify which one we're talking about or else we could spend a couple hours talking about different things. Yeah. Volk.
I would encourage everyone to give.
I'm glad you've joined us, Volk.
Oh, go ahead.
Volk, is your mic working?
Yeah. Thanks for having me and stuff. I'm excited to hear everyone's perspectives on this.
Nice. Well, thanks for joining us. As soon as Eliyahu jumps in, we will deal with this. In some, breaking news, fresh news, certain parts of British Columbia, I'm not sure if it's all British Columbia, but certain parts are now in a state of emergency due to these wildfires that are burning. So be safe.
Oh, man.
Does that surprise anyone?
No, not at all. Like, we knew it was coming. We've had this stretch of weather that's been the hottest weather we've seen in a very long time. Maybe, it even broke records. So what up, Eliyahu?
Hey guys, what's going on?
What's up?
So today I chose this topic because I find it really interesting about the ethics of torture. And I don't want to get too bogged down in the definitions of what torture means. So I figured that what we can use as a thought experiment is just torture. It's Room 101 from 1984, if you've ever read that book. Room 101 is just whatever would be the torture to you, that's what it is. Whatever would break your will if they did it to you. So that way, if you were the one that would get turned on by having the needle stuck in your dick or whatever, that's not what torture is. Torture is just imagine what would cause you to confess to the thing or whatever it is. So we're talking about whether or not that is ever a moral thing to do or necessary or the ethical thing to do. And so anyone can jump in and start if they'd like, if they have a take on it.
What about psychological, not physical? Does that count?
Yeah, so I was looking at the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy here. So the definition I posted in the announcements page was the definition they use is, it's kind of a mouthful, but it goes like this. Torture is the intentional infliction of extreme physical suffering on some non-consenting, defenseless person, and the intentional substantial curtailment of the exercise of the person's autonomy. So they don't really talk about mental suffering. They say that mental suffering, they put that under a different category where they say that's inhumane treatment. So like forcing someone to look like they're having sex with an animal, taking pictures of it and putting it on social media or something like that, they don't count that as torture. They would count that as something different. So
like,
here we're talking about physical
forcing
suffering.
someone to stay awake for extended periods of time.
Yeah, that they would
sort of
count.
like
That they
halfway
would count
in
as would count sleep deprivation, yeah, as a form of torture. Yeah.
I mean, my take on it is, like a lot of things, and I swear I should get this tattooed across my forehead. It depends, right? If you're torturing somebody who knows how to defuse a bomb that's going to kill 1,000 people and they refuse to tell you, how's he going to get the answers out of it? Do you want to save that 1,000 people? Well, then you might have to go through extreme measures. But if you're, say, just a bunch of pirates and you're torturing someone to find out where their gold is, it's like, maybe that's not so great for humanity. So in my view, like just about everything else about human life, it truly depends on the circumstances and the situation.
So I'm curious if we go ahead, Bruce. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying the end justifies the means.
Bruce, you believe the end justifies the means?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. I'm curious if we've ever actually been in a
that.
situation like that. I'm curious if we ever actually been in a situation where, like, we know that the guy knows where the bomb is and he knows how to defuse it, and we've got to, force him to eat bacon in order for him to tell us.
No, I've never been in that. No, I know people that kind of have, although they haven't given me all the details. But I've never had.
That's how it was done, especially during the Iraq-Afghanistan war. I mean, really how it was done. So from waterboarding, on the spot to excessive. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of ways that there was leeway given to command to get answers quickly in order to save lives quickly. And I think that when you're dealing with somebody that is trying to harm others intentionally, and it is very clear and blatant, and you are on a timeline, you need to inflict shock to a person to get past their mental immunity, I would say torture is warranted.
But I think what was interesting about the Abu Ghraib situation is that the torture wasn't ended after they gave the information, which is why it was so infamous. It was like they continued to humiliate and, piss on the prisoners and all kinds of things, even after they had given the information that they needed.
Maybe there was more information that they would disclose that they weren't aware of, or the torture changed the torturers and they just now developed a zest for torturing.
That's what I think. Yeah, I think that. That's another question. Is that it seems to me that if you're going to go by this method, that torture is only right. Torture is right, to obtain the information in the moment. Then you have to stop the torture as soon as the person gives you the information that you want. Like otherwise, it's just like sadistic kind of. There's no real justification for it.
So then it would cease to be ethical at that point.
That seems to be what I think.
I would also add that torture for the sake of things like conversion, that should be considered a crime against humanity. Can't believe I'm saying these words, but here we are. That, to try to convert somebody to either your theism or your way of living or your cultural norms, to use, which I would consider concentration camps like the ones that Muslims are dealing with in China right now, or the concentration camps of the Nazi era, I would consider those to be torture. That should have been considered a crime against humanity that is punishable by the worst means ever. Because that's not, come on, people. Torture should, in my opinion, torture should be used for when it benefits the safety and prosperity of society. Anything other than that, you're really not helping the human cause.
Jimmy, do you have anything to say about torture?
Actually, Aaron said basically what I was going to say. If the means of your torture is to basically save lives, I think it's justified. Like if you have, if you know that what you can get out of the person is potentially going to be beneficial for the people that you are serving, then yeah, it's ethical to torture someone. I have no problem with the people that I've voted for doing that.
About S, what do you think? Nothing from S. What about Volk?
Hello.
Hi, Volk.
Yeah. I think that we're all kind of in agreement that some kind of torture is necessary. I think the difference might be not if torture is necessary, but what form of torture is permissible, maybe. So, you guys want to take a crack at that?
Sorry, I did want to add something. I went to go get my headphones. I wanted to add if what is the sort of time scale in which we're saying this? Because I would challenge the conversion thing. I'm not for it, but I would just pose the question. Say if you knew that a certain ideology or certain perspective in life would like bring about prosperity within society, are you allowed to then torture and convert a person over to the more prosperous one? That's not the word, prosperous one.
No.
Well, that sounds like a Bruce argument about and justifying the means there.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that
No.
Bruce would concede that the world would be a better place if everyone was a Christian.
And that's precisely why I say no. Everyone thinks they have the keys to what makes a prosperous society, and everyone could be just as wrong as everyone else. So, in my opinion, no.
And I think that you could use this argument about the timing. I think that's something to also talk about, because in maybe not in conversion necessarily, but in like terrorist situations or other national security situations, I think time is something to consider. Like if it's an immediate threat, obviously it's more viable to torture somebody. What about if it's a more long-term effect? Like what are the moral ramifications? Like, is it immediate that we need to torture this person now if there's a threat maybe in a month or so? Or, factoring that in.
I would say a comment towards that is like when you're torturing someone to get information, you don't know if a threat is going to come tomorrow or like in a month.
I just wanted to say
true.
that just a half hour into the poll, I asked, is torture ever ethical? There hasn't been many comments yet, but 60% no so far out of the 60 votes that are in. So there's a lot of no's out there.
Well, they're wrong.
Well, I wouldn't say they're wrong, but what I would say is I only say that there are instances where torture might be, I'm not even going to say right or morally justified. I would say necessary, because, and to answer the question of what types, I would say that as long as you're not doing anything, the torture should literally be only, if you're going to do it, it should only be for the purposes of extracting what you need out of someone. And therefore, you should not be using methods that are going to cause permanent or long-standing damage to a person. You shouldn't be doing anything to them that they can't recover from. But to go
That's
back
what I
to
was
the
going to
60
say, yeah.
Well, to go back to the 60% of people who say no, I would say to those people, I completely understand where you're coming from a humanitarian standpoint, but we can't ignore the fact that there are situations in which there is critical information that someone has that they are refusing to give for usually really stupid reasons. So I would ask that 60% of people, what do you propose we do in exchange for torture?
Here's an interesting
that will result in the saving of human life or protection of innocent people, right? Because that's the result that you really want. I mean, at the end of the day, you could look at it like protecting the rights of this person who is probably a criminal of some kind versus protecting, the innocent. Probably more people even.
Yeah, I was just about to say a similar thing. I was thinking of the question. So priests or many people of like that sort of position in a religion have a sort of secrecy when a person's telling them like a confession, and they won't even tell, even if there's like a crime being committed, and that a person tells them, because it's like a sacred thing between them and God, and they're confessing it towards them. So should we torture them for information then, if we know that they know that person is sort of a terrorist or something? Just an interesting thing I've thought about.
Well, the individual person doesn't need to be a terrorist. The individual person maybe just has knowledge of the bomb, and like because maybe their husband is the terrorist or something. I don't know. I'm just saying, as an example, like maybe they are not the terrorist. They haven't actually done anything wrong, but they were in the right place at the right time, and they've got the info.
Exactly. So they're totally innocent. Like they haven't planted the bomb, they haven't even made the bomb, but they have the information. Is it then ethical to torture them because they have the information that will save millions of lives, or not millions, sorry, thousands or hundreds lives anyway.
Whatever the number is.
Yeah.
What about
could be
divine evil? Do you have anything to add there?
Well, my position is primarily anti-physical violence in general. I do not think that it's cannot be justified in that way. Like it's like capital punishment is that you can argue that capital punishment makes sense, but there's still so many underlying elements that has to be considered that make it unviable strategy. In the same way, I think torture is not viable in the sense that it also can be applied to people who are actually innocent and do not have anything to no information, and you cannot tell between one and the other, and you'll torture them trying to extract information that they do not actually have. And then you also have the people who have to do the torturing, and either they're already broken people, emotionally and psychologically, or you're making them that way. So I generally against it. In almost maybe some stressful emotional torture is maybe plausible, but otherwise, if you cannot convince someone or argue with them to give the information deliberately, then I don't think torture solves it.
Right. So it seems
would people be willing to? I was going to say, would people be willing to torture a child if they knew about their parents' situation? Like a child that knew about their father, who was the terrible person. Would you torture them? Would that be okay?
Oh, I don't think that would be as common as torturing just a criminal of some kind. Though that's the thing.
But
you could find people who know this person who's the threat. Could find associates maybe, or other people other than the child. Like surely there'd be other people that you'd be able to find than just a kid.
Maybe not.
What about if we switch it to just innocent people? They've done nothing wrong, committed no crime. Would you then do it?
That's the definition, right? It says a non-consenting, defenseless person.
And you don't always know if somebody's innocent or not. And I mean, that is a valid point. Like sometimes people will be mistakenly tortured, and then that's sad. But sometimes there's situations where that's not the case, and people have a lot of bad intentions.
Sorry.
Information is vital to saving people's lives. I mean, what's the alternative? I don't think anyone here is in favor of randomly torturing whoever, but you're in favor of trying to save whoever the people's lives or protecting people, things like that. That would be the reason behind it.
So are you saying that they must be they must be like, what was what I'm trying to say? They must have suspicion that they've committed a crime.
Right. A decent amount of suspicion or evidence of some kind.
I would say, just to comment on what Divine Evil said, I understand the idea that innocent people are going to get tortured, but innocent people go to jail. Innocent people have gotten the death penalty. The problem is that we're quote unquote imperfect creatures trying to come up with perfect systems. There's an element of life isn't fair that we're all just going to have to acknowledge when it comes to certain things. Although, with that being said, to kind of answer my own question, I suppose that one of the alternatives to torture is to simply teach people from a young age to say something if they see something. If we had more whistleblowers, we probably have less torture. So.
And I would add to that, for example, like we can like perhaps try to find other means, like trying to test the psychedelics to be used against the people who conceal information and try to open them up this way instead of physically torturing them.
Or just get them drunk.
How is that different than torture? How is it different than torture if you're doing something without their consent?
Well, because you're not physically harming them.
Well, you're still doing something without their consent.
What was
that they haven't got? You know,
what was the example that he came up?
The consent is not the problem that I have with that.
Well, what about mental harm in that you're making them give up something they wouldn't normally give up, like whatever it is? You're now forcing them into a situation with psychedelic or whatever drugs to give you information. I see that no differently.
If they're refusing to give you critical information that will save people's lives, I feel like at some point you have to say you forfeit that ability to be comfortable while we're trying to get information out of you.
Well, I agree, but I'm just saying, like, to make the distinction between physical harm and like forcing a person to take a substance to get information, I see a very similar situation there.
Yeah, can I add something else? So there are also a lot of we're obviously talking mostly in terms of like terrorism now, but there's also a lot of people in like neighborhoods who won't talk to the police, even though they know something. Like, would we?
Yeah, you're not going to rat.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Would we just talk to the people who want rat?
Do you want to make community safer or not? Do you want to make community safer or not? I mean, what are your goals?
They're not really safe if they're being tortured.
Well, there's the line in Reservoir Dogs is like, you could beat this guy all day, and eventually he'll tell you who started the Chicago fire. That doesn't make it so.
Right. I was thinking about that too. Yeah. But that cop did know.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, I mean, we could talk about. Aaron brought up the point earlier that it shouldn't be something that the person can't recover from. So, like amputating a limb doesn't seem to me to be an acceptable form of torture, given the fact that they're not going to grow their arm back.
Well, what about PTSD?
About PTSD?
Yeah, it would be incredibly prevalent.
PTSD among survivors of torture.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That is true. That is a point. They're waking up in a cold sweat, thinking about the water dripping on their forehead.
I just want to reemphasize. I just want to reemphasize quickly. None of this would be an issue if we taught people from a young age to not be afraid to disclose information. Like the only reason I can see as to why torture would be viable in situations of terrorism is because there are just people out there who just don't want to help. If people were more willing to help and just tell you what they know, especially if there was some agreement that they wouldn't be incriminated themselves, then would we even have to have a conversation about torture? Would torture even be a thing at that point? I just want to reemphasize that.
That's really like difficult when you have a lot of nations, with really different ideologies, literally wanting to kill each other all the time. Like, they'll grow their children up to be vastly different from our children. It's hard to do that.
The other thing to consider is that yes, there's people who probably will have some PTSD after this procedure, but the thing is that these same people are not just, innocent people. The vast majority of them who are in this situation where a government would torture them. These are people who would want to kill people or otherwise severely harm them. Really, the action done on them is reflective of their own bad character.
Yes, but we're talking about innocent people within the community that won't talk.
I
think I
wanted to
wanna-
answer the
Are
previous.
you really innocent if you won't cooperate then?
I think.
Well,
so.
it seems
thing
that
in-
those communities.
There's
It seems
a
to me
such
that
thing in
those
America-
communities. Go ahead,
Well,
Aaron.
there's a such thing in America as, what is it called? It's like impeding justice or something, or obstructing justice. Basically,
Yeah,
the
that's what
thing
it's
where the
called.
cops. Yeah, I mean, so you're talking about innocent people who won't talk. Are you really that innocent if you won't talk? If you're innocent, then what do you have to hide?
Well, there are a lot of communities in which if you do talk, then you get killed. I'd say it's very different then. The police need to do a better job in creating a safer security for those people. They don't do a good job now.
I mean, they can't even
Yeah, so it
protect
seems
people.
like-
They can't even protect people in prison. They can't even protect
Exactly.
people in prison. Like you're not,
Exactly.
you're not going to protect people on the street.
And within this conversation, I mean, it's not like the public will know everything or the community around these criminals will know everything about the illegal operations they're holding, It's so even if everybody was to report everything they knew, there's still secrets that only the people who are working and collaborating with the criminals will know. Torture would still be a thing.
I was going to say that it seems to me that those communities as a whole, not all of them, but there are a lot of communities that think that the worst thing you can do is to go to the police. In
don't
this
rat
sort
on
of
your friends.
this attitude of we will work out our disputes amongst each other, either within the church or within our family or within our gang. But the worst thing you can do is to go to the cops.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought of something. I think one thing that might change the scope of torture methods is if they weren't done behind closed doors in dark rooms. If they were done, and if torture was done in places where other people could see it, that might really change the face of how we interrogate people who we suspect to have knowledge of things that are critical.
Well, because it
I
would
don't
deter
know.
them from like not talking.
I kind of feel like it'd be the opposite. Like the more people would see anybody suffering, even if it looked like it wasn't that serious, people would kind of, wimp out and just not like it.
I'm talking more of the perspective of the methods that are used to get information out of people. If there's a lot of things that you can get away with when no one's around to witness it, but when you're doing it in public where an entire community can see what the hell you're doing, you may or may not be compelled, shall we say, to temper your methods.
Yeah, but what torture methods are tempered enough to be not condemned by the public? Can you think of one? I can't.
I feel like I'm disagreeing with you guys a little bit. So hypothetically, if we get the information from them and we're going to say, let's save 8,000 people, I am willing to say, you guys are saying that we shouldn't do anything to them that they can't recover from, like amputate, like cut off one of their limbs or something. If I know that it's going to save 8,000 lives, I think I would every time decide to do something as drastic as cut their arm off, say.
The problem with
Go ahead. Does anybody disagree with that?
Well, the problem with drastic measures is you'll get to a point where people will just say anything to make the torture stop.
Well, yeah,
So
but
at that
I'm
point,
just saying,
you're creating a really inefficient interrogation system.
Plus,
it's
how would you be
verifiable though. It's verifiable. So if somebody says something that isn't true, you can check it by doing an operation or whatever at that location, or shaking down the witness or whatever who they're claiming to. So
Yeah,
because
but
they can give false evidence.
in this hypothetical, you're going to get the information.
I think that
Jimmy, I can accept. Go ahead, Volk. Sorry.
It's okay. I think that it's a balance between the two. I don't think that we should jump to just chopping off limbs in an extreme situation. I'm not talking about like an average. I'm saying an extreme situation. I don't think we should jump to chopping off people's limbs. But I think that if all of the conventional ways of torture that are humane and ethical, that commonly accepted ethical, maybe even things like the waterboarding, which people may not like, which doesn't cause permanent damage, say. I think once we've exhausted those options, and if there's a limited amount of time, and if we have to choose between the rights of the criminal versus the rights of other people, and it's an imminent threat, then that would be up for interpretation. That would be my position.
Conscious, what about you? Do you have anything to say about torture?
Oh, sorry. Did you say something?
Yeah,
sorry,
I said if you had. Yeah, I said if you had anything to say about torture.
I'm just kind of listening in at this point. I wasn't here for the whole discussion. I mean, like you were saying, if it's gonna save a lot of lives, and there are ways to do it where there's not lasting damage, I suppose, maybe psychological, but I don't know. I'm still thinking.
Sure. All right. In the meantime, we'll go to Matthew.
This was said because I also got here kind of late, but I'm just like in a general sense okay with torture if it'll save people, because similar to how you forfeit, but we take away people's rights if they commit crimes. You take away their freedom, their right to vote, depending on the state. Well, I mean, I don't think any state lets you vote while you're in prison, but you lose rights when you get convicted of a crime. So I think you should also lose the right to not have harm inflicted on you if you choose to commit a crime where there's still information concealed. So that's my basis of why I'm okay with it.
Okay, but they have
I would
to
add something.
Sorry.
I would add something and just say that it would be wrong to punish someone through torture, in the sense that it's like retaliation. Like you commit a crime, and instead of sending them to prison or whatever, somebody would torture them instead of that. I don't think that's ethical.
What?
Well,
Oh,
yeah,
like somebody
just to
comes,
get
somebody
to reach a
comes
certain
and
cause.
Like
it's like,
Mirror.
in exchange for your jail sentence of 10 years, somebody just comes and pulverizes your legs.
Right.
Well, let
I
me
would
ask the
not
question then, because I actually hold the opposite view.
Really?
Let's say that you have someone who, like an Ed Gein or a John Wayne Gacy, someone who commits a horrible crime, and now you have a family who, let's say their father was the breadwinner and now their father's murdered. In my view, if the remaining members of that family were told, all right, here's the guy who did it, and they responded with, I want this guy to be tortured, I don't know that I'd be against that. I'm sorry. If you're going to cause torture to someone else, I don't see any reason why. And yes, it's not going to solve anything necessarily, but when things happen, they happen, and you can't undo them no matter what you do. But in my view, if you're causing psychological harm to somebody else by committing a crime, especially one that takes someone's life, if those people want you to be tortured, I cannot justify why you would tell them no.
I generally think that punishment only should be dealt out if they have some utility. We lock up criminals so that they don't keep committing crime. It's not just because we think they deserve it, although they do. But I don't think that would. I think that could have some utility if you said you could be tortured if you tortured someone else, like an eye for an eye, because then maybe people like evil serial killers would be less apt to do that if they thought the worst thing that could happen is that they could be tortured rather than just a life sentence.
Well, unfortunately, they tried that with public hangings, and that didn't change a goddamn thing. So It won't be a perfect system, obviously, but
Well, it got rid of public executions. Like we had the last public hanging in like 1936, I believe, in the United States, and I do think it. I mean, there hasn't been as many capital punishments, I think, since then. Because it's
No, instead people just rot in cages for the rest of their lives. It's not
I don't know. Can I give my opinion on that?
It's not exactly fair or ethical. That's also torture in many ways.
Okay, we'll go to S and then conscious.
Yeah. So my perspective on that would be, I would say putting people in prison. I don't see it as a sort of punishment thing. I see it as a sort of rehabilitation completely. I don't see any utility in punishment at all, except from like deterrence. But I don't really like that much. So I see it completely as rehabilitation. I think that people can change even if they're the worst people imaginable. And so, losing that ability to rehabilitate them, kind of, you lose the possibility of them doing any good past their evil actions. Yeah.
I mean, can a sadistic psychopath really be rehabilitated?
They can. I think that they can do some good, even if it's writing one letter that like makes one person smile.
I think it depends on the situation, maybe, but in some cases, no. But I would say, like, if they're unable to be restored to their full status in society, then it's just as much torture or being placed in a prison cell for the rest of their lives. It would be much better to have swift, quick justice and have capital punishment for a very small number of crimes, and any other crime would have full restitution restored to any of the affected parties, and then the individual's rights are fully restored or were never taken in the first place, which is the best of both worlds. Victimless crimes aren't in jail, rights aren't removed, and those who have actually committed capital crimes get capital punishment swiftly. So it's it's a much more efficient way and a much more just way of dealing with crime.
And
it would be very nice if it really was as swift as you say.
Let's keep in perspective here what we mean by the term criminal, because even though I have absolutely no empathy for criminals, because I've been the victim of crimes myself, let's not forget what a criminal actually is. What is a criminal? A criminal is someone who doesn't conform to the notion that humanity wants to shed its most naturalistic sort of instincts and conform to a more peaceful society. That's what a lot of criminals are. They're people who, they see society as it is, but they still choose to let their instincts control them. And so we set those people, that's why we put those people in jail, to remove them from that society so that other people won't be affected by them. So I can understand the idea of prison supposed to be a way to remove them from society, to help rehabilitate them so that they can go back into society. I'm sorry, but we are still cavemen, and we are still predators at the end of the day. Yeah. Some people just cannot be changed. Now, if you want to keep them in prison for the rest of their lives, or at least until the point where they aren't capable of causing harm anymore, go right ahead. But some people you're just not going to convert, because there's also motivation behind a lot of crime. And a lot of that motivation includes deep psychological issues that may be permanent.
Yeah, but some, maybe like a couple percentage points, even if it's like 1%, but that's not a high thing. Like if we say capital punishment for all serial killers, but say 20% of them will be rehabilitated in some way, you're taking away that chance.
Have we ever done any actual studies of this kinds of? Have we ever done studies of this kinds of thing? I honestly don't know. Like the worst of the worst criminals who have managed to outlive their own jail sentences, like when they get out of prison, do they commit violent crimes again? I honestly don't know.
I think there's tons of studies around like rehabilitation and whether or not people are rehabilitated. But I would argue that at least in the United States, if someone's rights aren't fully restored, they're not rehabilitated, nor are they functioning citizens in society at that point. So I would say that it's still cruel and unusual to remove an individual's rights if they're not in jail or dead. they should have full rights.
Are you talking about?
That's-
You're talking about the fact they get out of jail and then they can't vote. They're stuck working minimum wage for the rest
There's
of their
all sorts
life. They can't own a computer. Their internet browsing history is subject to search, and they can't
Any of the above.
have certain books, and they can't be even travel more than 30 miles outside of their hometown. And
they can't own a firearm. They have to tell everyone in the town that they were a sex criminal, like et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's not restorative justice in any way, and it's horribly. I think it's horribly unjust and torture in itself.
Do you not? I mean, if we're going to go by your logic, then why do we even put people in jail for committing crimes to begin with?
There you go. Now we're talking my language.
For safety reasons.
For very specific reasons would you do that? But they would be in jail for holding periods, while restitution is paid, and or the parties affected are restored or awaiting their death sentence in trial.
Well, the problem is that while there are some crimes that can absolutely be undone, if you sexually assault a child or kill someone, you can't undo that.
That's right. That's capital punishment.
Then that child has to live with that for the rest of their lives. So, in my opinion, that person who ruins that child's life, I think they do deserve to be tortured. I'm sorry. Because you're basically ruining from a young age, you're ruining someone's development and turning him into someone who will, in a very similar fashion to what you're complaining about people not having their full rights, this person's going to be untrustworthy or untrusting. They're going to be scared. Like, I'm sorry, but
what about bad parents? Should we torture them?
Depends on the situation.
Has some very strong feelings about that.
Because you just said about the lack of trust development in the child and stuff like that. Well, bad parents do that all the time, and maybe we should torture them.
Maybe we should torture all single mothers for not raising their kid with a father.
Oh, God.
I
don't think we should.
There's no torture. The torture in those situations
traumatize their children.
Torture doesn't have. There's no means. There's no ends to that necessarily. With the torture in those cases would purely be some sort of punitive form of punishment. That would be not torture. But killing them maybe.
I think we can eliminate. I think we can eliminate torture as a moral or ethical.
Okay, let's go do
punishment. Yeah, I think we can eliminate torture as a moral or ethical punishment because we do have a law of the land that says that shall not use cruel and unusual punishment. Torture obviously is defined
that all the time.
Torture is defined as cruel. Part of the definition of torture, I think, that you said. So there you go. It's already against the law to use torture.
Yeah, it is.
Our laws shouldn't be our morality.
I think there hasn't been a consensus. We're still going around the room about whether it's ever even ethical.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
My position would be relative. The answer would be relative to whatever the threat would be, and also relative to the certainty that this person has the information. So, like, if it's like anything. Mm-hmm. I would say yes, just because that person put themselves in the position to be doorstop between basically their rights versus whatever it would be, a million
What if-
people dying or whatever.
What if they're a NASA engineer and they just happen to know the codes?
Then they would surely tell if they were more innocent.
What if they're an enemy combatant and their treatment as a prisoner of war is already governed by a treaty that the country that you're supposedly running has already signed and agreed to?
So then that gets complicated. That's more political.
You do expect your enemies that you're fighting to treat your prisoners of war in a similar manner to the way that you treat their prisoners of war.
But some don't.
So
yeah, some don't.
If the circumstances are that high, I would be comfortable doing it.
What's
I mean,
the
if we're talking
significance of it
millions
being
of people, yeah.
specifically?
I mean,
What's
the only thing I would
significance of
say
it
is
being sexual specifically. Just like it's really, really bad or crossing a line. I think it's bad, but I would say like just
Well, that's
torture,
why at the
like
beginning
the worst torture you could imagine is probably the worst.
Yeah, that's what I said at the beginning. Is I said just picture yourself as if anyone's read 1984. It's like if you get put in the room where they can read your mind and they know whatever the thing is that would make you confess. So like in the book, the main character, like his biggest fear is rats. So they get these two giant rats that are the size of like puppies, like to come into the room and like gnaw away at him until he confesses. Right. So what I mean, if you like, we can go around the room and share what what would do it for us.
I mean, to respond to your question, Travis, regardless of my opinion on whether or not sexual torture should be used as a tool in incredibly high stakes situations, I would challenge anybody who would say, no, that's terrible. Well, then what the hell would you do then? When you know you have information that needs to be had in order to save people's lives, and you clearly have someone who's not willing, for whatever reason, to offer that information, you know you're not going to be able to incentivize them by giving them a reward for telling you that information. What the hell else are you going to do? Just let these people die?
There are other ways. I don't think
the
that
problem
would
with
work.
that rationale. The problem with that whole rationale is that there's always a situation where an enemy combatant doesn't want to give you the information that you think that could save some marginal number of lives, and you have to draw the line somewhere. And if you don't draw the line at no torture at all, you're going to end up with two societies eventually go to war with one another, and everyone that gets captured gets tortured, just like we had in Vietnam.
Well, just to be clear, my philosophy is very simply, if you think it's bad in desperate situations, then I would just urge you to come up with an alternative. That's all.
Yeah, the alternative is you're not allowed to torture people, because we already have signed a treaty that says we're not going to torture people.
Yeah, that is true. So it is a violation of it's a violation of, I believe, is it the Geneva Conventions that says that we've
it's the Geneva Convention.
Yeah, the Geneva Conventions are the ones that lay that out.
Right. I mean, we
no torture under any with no torture despite the
not of
circumstances.
not of enemy combatants, no, because those enemy combatants are not individual moral agents. They're agents of they're essentially representatives of the state, and you're at war with the state. You're not at war with the soldiers that happen to be fighting in the army. Many of them were conscripted against their will
The state is the soldiers, though. There would be no state if there were no soldiers. Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, I was about to say you can say the same about the soldiers within, like, what's it called? ISIL? Is that what they call themselves now?
Yeah.
ISIS.
Yeah,
ISIL,
Daesh, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, right.
Soldiers are conscripted, and they also believe that they're going to go to paradise. So that's an even stronger form of conscription.
I don't think the issue. Well, I could be wrong, but I thought most people were saying they're okay with torture, assuming they know the end, right? So the means justified. The end justified the means in those scenarios. That's the only time it's justifiable. But I guess this would be very small circumstances, and the conscripted soldiers wouldn't necessarily be those situations.
Yeah, outside of knowing beyond a reasonable doubt that there is somebody who does indeed have information that would absolutely change the outcome of a circumstance for the better, I really don't think that torture is something we should be doing because it's not the most effective. You're not making yourself look good in any other situation, in my personal opinion. So,
Yeah.
Well, again, it's got to do with the circumstance. If you're in a high stakes situation where someone knows something that's going to save a country or save a group of people, then what the hell else are you going to do? But in other situations where there are other alternatives, where you don't, it's an extreme measure, right? It's something that you only do when you absolutely have no other choice. So it's not about being swayed. It's about the fact that extreme, dire situations call for dire solutions. Or desperate times call for desperate measures, if you will.
Right. Then that's the position that I hold too, and that's something that I would still hold is that, obviously in situations where it's not necessary, simply put, it's not necessary. I mean, especially in lower risk situations, there's multiple options, ways of convincing people to give up information. It would be in the more extreme situations, like there's a bomb that's going to go off at a mall or something, or even like a nuclear attack or something, then those are also the situations where you can start ramping up the amount of torture as is needed, not as is maybe desired as much as needed. I mean, nobody in their right mind would want somebody to suffer. You want the result. Oh, that would be inefficient, probably.
Yeah, and I stand by that.
It doesn't seem to me like something that would cause the sufficient amount of suffering needed to persuade somebody a certain way, as much as like
Yeah, I know a lot of people where that would be the answer.
I just don't think that would be a valid hypothetical. I don't think there would be any situation where that would be the case.
So what would be the outcome if the rape took place? Well, how many is it saving lives? Oh, you don't get it.
I mean that you could experimentally construct that situation and like try to create a story of real life that would fit in. I mean, how would that happen? Like you have some kind of hardened criminal who hates a certain ethnicity, for instance, and then wants to blow up a bunch of them. How does raping them have anything to do with
If you all
Well, Travis, let me.
Oh, and then to answer your question, if that's the case, then it would be comparing the result of not doing the action of whatever it is, which would be, millions of people dead, for instance, with a nuclear bomb or whatever, comparing the result of that specific situation and not doing the action with doing it. And so it would be that person suffering and embarrassment versus whatever the other side would be. If it's a million people, I would say yes, favoring the victims that person would be indirectly or directly harming. Yes, even though I wouldn't think that would be a very common thing at all. To be fair.
It wouldn't be common, but I mean, you can look up videos of people who their biggest fear is the sound of a balloon popping, right? And all you got to do is you put them in this room and you hold the needle up to the balloon, and they're going to tell you whatever they.
I don't think so.
So you think
Yeah, I
rape
was
would
gonna
be
say,
like
I
the
don't
last
either.
resort?
I don't think so either, actually.
So once you've actually made the conscious decision that torture is the method that I need to go with, whatever sub method that may be, it's kind of an all or nothing game. It doesn't
Yeah, all
necessarily
gloves are
matter
off.
morally what happened.
The gloves are off at that point.
Yeah,
Basically.
well, it's an all or nothing. It's either like Doolittle said, we all agree that we do not torture under any circumstances, or you decide that the scenario requires the use of torture, therefore you just go with it. I don't
This isn't
necessarily
a false
understand the
dichotomy type situation. This is not a false dichotomy situation.
There's a hierarchy of tactics, I guess. And do you think rape would be the absolute last resort?
I don't think it'd be useful at all from a practical sense. The majority of the time, torture is done with far less, I don't know, socially taboo methods. Go for it. Oh, yeah, no, I agree with your hypothetical for sure. Once you've decided to torture, then rape is not excluded from that. You are already morally depraved, so why not go whatever method you need?
I don't see what makes it so much different from like waterboarding someone. I mean, I know it's
It
violent,
doesn't.
but
It's only socially taboo. There's not really any other moral distinction, I don't
I
think.
don't. How is it morally?
Who is that question directed at?
Of course they will. Of course they will.
I was going to say, sure, if that's an effective method, but it's arguing method.
By the
Yes,
way, just to throw
Chad's
this on the
answer
table.
is yes.
To throw this on the table, because I know someone was about to say it. If we're all agreeing in this call that the only time, and I mean the only time, where torture would ever be considered anything other than morally deplorable is in a situation where it's a method used to ultimately keep people safe, then are you saying that being moral to that criminal is more moral than being moral to the millions, thousands to millions of people who would be saved by simply forcing information out of somebody?
Yeah, I don't engage
Yeah, let me
in
explain.
consequentialist calculus that way in my morality.
Yeah, let me explain how that can be resolved. If you're not faced with a choice, then it's not a question of morality. It's an action. If you have no choice, that's what we're talking about, the nuclear bomb where, the whole city of New York is destroyed if we don't torture this guy. All other options have been exhausted. Dude knows that's not a choice. That's essentially coercion.
So
right, the person who is involved in the decision is not making a choice. They don't have two different paths which are going to get them to their objective. So it's not a moral question. It's whatever action that person takes, which is the only action available, is essentially predetermined, and it's amoral.
And Doolittle.
It's not either moral or immoral.
So Doolittle, do you think at the top of that torture hierarchy, we ought try rape if everything else failed?
Let's just say you save more people, and the guy, I don't know, the guy's an enemy combatant.
Yeah.
And you have the option of doing a little butt stuff with him to save
whatever
save
it
the world.
takes, right?
Yeah, do whatever it takes to save the world. Yeah.
Okay, including rape. Okay.
It's the age-old question of sacrifice the one to save the many, right? That's basically what that's kind of where I can see that argument coming from.
As long as they're guilty of something?
Exactly. It's like, if you know that the actions of torturing one person is going to save many,
and
to say that it's immoral to torture that person, that just seems silly to me.
So yeah, that's you're talking about the very problem I have with standard consequentialist calculus that isn't based in maximizing well-being for yourself and those around you. That prisoner also gets that. They get that same treatment in my world. Because I understand that this is we lived in a predetermined cosmos, and they just rolled a shitty group of dice in the situation they found themselves in.
And before you ask, Travis, yes, if it's been determined that rape will absolutely bring you closer to the information you need, if you're already in that situation, set your empathy aside, please.
Yeah,
So my question would be then to Travis would be, what about the dice of the people, the victims, assuming there's more than one?
Yeah.
The victims of the person then, how would that be kind of rationalized in your perspective?
Well, that's all predetermined as well. As is our
there's more
conversation right
victims.
now. But we understand that it is.
You wouldn't torture the person?
No. I don't think I think the West has it right with regards, or at least the United States and Canada has it right with regards to torture.
So hypothetically, if you knew you could get the information,
yeah, I'm
you
not
wouldn't
going to.
torture.
No, I'm not going to sacrifice my morality.
So you would watch Rome burn, as it were.
That person would be punished. That person would be punished under the law of the land, 100%.
Well, we can imagine a situation where that's
you would have to
not
live.
like,
You would have to live though for the rest of your life knowing that those people weren't alive anymore.
Yep, that's fine. I did not know. I did not have knowledge that I was going to be able to save them.
Right, but also
But it
this is
was
an extreme hypothetical situation,
Yeah,
and
sure.
if those things happened a lot in everyday life, we would probably be rethinking our moral calculus about whether we allow torture.
Yeah, that's. Yeah.
What if
Right.
you
That's
thought
what
it
I'm
was
getting
very probable, like 98% chance that this was probably going to go off if we don't get the information from this person?
Yeah. I would
Is
ask.
that not-
bro. I
but-
mean, think of it this way. Like, okay, make it on a less. Let's lower the stakes just a little bit, and let's say that you know that this person has. So if anyone's familiar with bone marrow transplants, there's like 60 something million different kinds of bone marrow. So it's not like blood where there's only 4 or 8 different types of blood. The reason why we want to get as many people on the bone marrow registry as possible is because there's so many different kinds, and it's very hard to find somebody that's a match for you. So even if we've got like 50 million people on the registry, somebody has blood cancer, it can be really hard to find somebody that matches so that they could get a bone marrow donation. So let's say that you've got a blood disease and you need the bone marrow transplant, and you find someone that you know is the bone marrow match to you. And they may be one of the only matches in the world, because that's the reality. And they say, I don't really want to give you my bone marrow. I don't like the idea of the needle sticking into my pelvic bone and extracting the marrow. I just don't want to do it.
Are you asking me if I'm going to take a pickaxe to their head?
I'm going to say, like, what?
Like an ice
what are you
pick?
going to do?
Uppercut?
I have a question for Travis. Maybe one more question for him. Would be like, okay, say you have a firearm, like a pistol or whatever, and you have 2 people who are innocent shoppers at a mall, and you have somebody who very clearly is upset with a gun, who looks like they very much want to kill both people.
Yeah. I have more information in that. Yeah, I have more information in that scenario.
It's you don't know for sure. Maybe
yeah, it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to be for sure.
But here's the thing, though. Is that not the same in the sense that the person is their stance, their choices have led them up to this point, the potential criminal, they are threatening the livelihood of various amounts of people.
Yes, they are.
You have the
I'll tell you the
option
difference.
to protect them with an action that could result in their death.
I'll tell you the difference.
Or injury.
You need to, when you're talking about situations like that, you need to speak within the realm of the illusion of free will that we have. Well, I was before I'm talking about the greater sense of understanding existence, but I'm still part of this deterministic chain, and I'm not saying that I can control it. But my justification within the realm of free will, this person who has taken up arms and is charging towards the grocery store or whatever they're doing, I have enough information to know that this person is going to do things or potentially do things that are antithetical to the well-being of the people around me and myself. So that's my justification to then protect myself and people as much as I can.
Then I guess a follow-up question would be, what if you had similar evidence on somebody who say that there's a terrorist, all his group died, he's the leader, he's the one left, he's the one who armed the nuke or whatever, and the nuke is headed toward New York City.
Yep.
And we know this is the guy. We've seen footage of him arming it or had eyewitness accounts. It's confirmed. Would he be tortured in your view?
I have no good reason to believe that torture works. Really. You might get lucky on some of these guys, but I don't think it works that well.
Again, we have to go back to, at some point, just out of a basic instinct to survive, people are going to tell you whatever the hell they think you want to hear if it's going to make the torture stop.
Not necessarily. Like, let's.
God damn it, Travis.
Have we looked up the information on the efficacy of torture?
The statistics say that torture is wholly ineffective. Yes.
Ineffective.
Yes.
Yeah. Totally.
The statistics show that it is ineffective.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the information that you get, if you get any, is more likely than not to be false.
False, exactly.
Right. So, yeah, if to answer your question, Volk, I don't have any good reason to believe that torture itself, the thing that's in question, is going to be effective at all. If anything, sitting down and trying to reason with them and appeal to some kind of empathy, that would be a much better use of my time than in trying to rape them like a bunch of turds set on the air here.
Like
Oh,
I said
I
at the
mean,
beginning, if your
Well,
goal
in
is to
the
save people, then look, you either want to
in
save
the
people or you don't.
look in the
if
hypothetical
someone's
though, it was a high, very high probability that if you were to perform the act, you would save millions of people.
in an extreme situation, so we're
Yeah, and
having
we can
millions
and
of
we
people involved.
and we can take that back a bit if you want. We can take it back. We can make it less extreme.
But I
we
would
can,
also
we can say
add,
you have a
and
50% chance of getting the answer, or we can say 40%, 50. Like, where is this calculus going to sit? Where you're finally okay performing the rape?
Anything less than 100%, I would say you're probably better off to just try to coerce them using positive reinforcement rather than negative. Because again, I understand where you're coming from, Travis. Torture is not something that we want to do as a species trying to move away
Well, we've
from
tried that.
our sort of primal.
And I know you know that, Aaron. We've tried that in history. We've tried torture. We've tried to torture people out of
we
things.
have.
Yeah.
Yeah, look at the witch trials that Nivik likes to talk about so much.
One of the dark spots in human history.
What you end up getting is you torture someone, say give up all of your witch cousins, and we'll stop torturing you. And then, hey, it turns out she's got a lot of witch cousins.
Yeah, exactly. The ones that really bullied her when she was young.
Yeah. and then each of those you go and you torture them, and it's a never-ending chain, right?
I just don't think that there's enough decent humanity within somebody in an extreme situation. I never suggested that torture would be for anything less than, something like was extreme. I don't think that somebody who is psychopathic or sadistic enough to conjure up such an extreme situation that they would be abject to reason or any kind of positive. That would be my underlying presupposition.
All I'm saying is this: if your goal in those, if the goal of torture in those kinds of circumstances is to make an attempt to keep people safe, I mean, you either want to save people or you don't. But what I will say is that if you're at the point, well, hold on, Travis. If you're at the point where you're like, fuck it, we've got to rape this guy to get these answers out of him, you're probably not going to get the answers out of him. So,
well, yeah, I'm glad you brought that part up.
Here's another interesting
another
interesting question for you. How are you going to make a set of policies that's going to manifest in a fair torture system where the people that you want tortured get tortured, and the people who you think don't need to be tortured don't get tortured? We're talking about using a government or a military or a police force, which we all trust so much, to effectively implement this policy in a free and fair manner. What kind of people are going to be attracted to that job that you just created? Head torture.
That's where we'll put the
secretary.
That's where we'll put the sickos
torture administration
who are locked up. We'll put them to work.
And right, so a person who would take that job, right, is not the kind of person that you're going to be able to say, maybe you ought to slow down a little bit on the tortures here, and he's going to take it seriously and be like, I guess there's not any tortures to do today that are worth it. So I'm just going to hang out for 3 weeks and maybe some more terrorists that have real information will crop up. No, this guy's going to be a sadistic bastard. That
it's like, hey, wait a minute! Like, I just made this new
every excuse to torture people, and it's going to get out of hand. And that
Hey,
kind of shit happens.
It'll be the new dream for the kid growing up. I want to be the torture guy.
Oh, please.
Torture administration.
I can't wait to
But I mean,
torture when I grow up. Yeah, I can't wait. I'm going to do it to Doggy.
I don't think sounded strangely like Mickey Mouse.
I don't think you can make an objective system where something like the ideal of the moral form of torture that you're envisioning can be implemented without being taken like way too far, because just the imperfection of the people that are executing it.
Oh boy, I can't wait to pluck your fingernails out. Oh boy.
Well, I would say that the people whose job it is to torture is probably only a couple of steps above the people whose job it is to handle dead bodies. I would say that maybe the people whose job it is to torture is more extreme, but the people who handle dead bodies might be great runners up for that job.
I don't think.
Right.
I
Well,
don't
they're
think it's
private
similar.
first classes and maybe a corporal in our current.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or like the job that Zombie has.
We have a number of people that currently administer the lethal injection. We used to have people that chopped heads off. We have a number of people that throw people into psychiatric wards and padded rooms, and perform psychiatric analysis on individuals against their will because they can't. They're a harm to themselves and others. So I don't think it's a far reach to think that we could find people to do the job necessary.
Oh, I think
No,
we
but
could
the
find
point that
them.
he's making is that like if a job application went out for Secretary of Torture, there'd be like 35 million people gunning for that job. There'd be like 35 million people super eager. They'd be extremely eager to be like, oh my gosh, I get to pluck his eyeballs out. Yes.
I take the Adam Carolla approach on this, where he's like, if you're ever trying to find someone to coach the T-ball league, you get the guy that does not want to do it. He does not want to do T-ball. He's not going to, that's the guy you get. And the same for the torture. You get the person that doesn't want to do it. You have to push them and beg them to do it. The guy that's too eager to coach the T-ball team, no, you're not doing it. You're not, I don't think so.
You're not spending any time alone with my kids.
Yeah, you're not doing it. The same with the person that wants to torture.
It's like, why do you want this so bad?
Yeah, that's the Adam Carolla approach to that one. He likes it
really
too much.
like working with kids.
He likes it too much. Yeah. I've always
You go to the guy that's
I've always
Again,
loved
we could have a Jeffrey Dahmer type put his skills to work for the state as opposed to doing it illegally to innocent people.
Yeah.
So
Ricky
now
Gervais has a joke about that. Like Ricky Gervais is like, yeah, you know what I can't stand is when people show me pictures of their kids. It's like I don't care at all. But when someone shows you a picture of your kids, you can't you have to look at the picture for the right amount of time. You can't just look at it for a tenth of a second and say, yeah, go fuck yourself. But you also can't stare at the picture of their kids. And just keep staring at it. Be like, can you send me that picture?
Have you heard George Carlin talk about that? When he's like, these people who are obsessed with their children and everything they want to do is shove pictures of them in their face. Do you know what I do? I grab that picture. I say, you know what? Tammy's starting to get a nice set of tits.
By the way, Travis, if I may, since you basically just called me a turd on YouTube,
I didn't mean...
I just want you to understand. Yeah. I just want you to understand my lack of opposition to torture as a method comes purely from a state of, this all goes back to what are your goals? That's how I feel about a lot of things in life. What are your goals? If your goal in the only cases where I would ever consider torture to be ethical are to protect people, if you don't at least make an attempt to try and save people, whatever that looks like, if you don't think it's torture, then what the hell do you think it should be? Which is a totally fair argument.
That means I'm the turd. I never knew it all.
No, not necessarily. but all I'm saying is that if you're not even going to make the attempt in those cases where torture might be part of the conversation, then don't even bother giving a shit about whether people's lives are in danger.
I never would use torture. It's just a failed attempt. It's like
I remember,
like I said,
watching
trying to get through to them like a hostage negotiator would is better, I think. And I
remember watching an old interview on Stephen Colbert where he had a guy who worked for the CIA, and he told him about how instead of torturing, I just came up to the guy and just started talking to the terrorists like a person, and try to be friends with them, and I was able to get him to tell me stuff. That was much easier. Get what he wanted. So we've kind of known for a while now, torture's not really.
And by the way, Aaron, I meant turd in the most loving way that could be meant.
You're still a turd.
No, you
Not
didn't.
a
No,
soggy
you didn't. You're not fooling me, Travis. I know exactly what you were getting at.
Just like
You are not
major
fooling
pain.
me.
You're a turd. You're just not a soggy one.
Oh, and
Right. You're one of those silent ones that pass easily.
We have
Look,
we have an objective
what I-
an objective test for this. Can you or can you not be polished?
Polished turd. Nice.
You cannot.
Basically, all I'm saying is this. I understand. The problem is that we're acting like every single method is foolproof. I mean, I would prefer to go with a lie detector test over torture, but lie detector tests don't work, and they're easily fooled. And this is why I said that there's an element of life isn't fair that we're all going to have to accept as human beings. I've certainly had to accept it. If you want to save people, then sometimes you've got to do, especially when you know that there's information that people have that they're not willing to share. If you've exhausted all your other measures, well, then you either accept that people die or you do what needs to be done.
Yeah.
And let it be known, I identify as a turd with Aaron as well. So
Yeah, I'm a turd. My only objection to your hypothetical, Travis, was like, so you seductively like lured me into this hypothetical, right? And like halfway into the hypothetical, I was like,
I dropped sex
shit.
on you.
No, I was like, shit, I'm the one that has to rape this person.
Yeah, can I ask why did
You know?
why is it coming to rape all of a sudden?
Well, because
is that someone's kink or something?
Because people were saying that they're all right with torture in order to get the job done, right? And Metal, would you be willing to take that as far as raping this this person that had information in order to try to get that information out of them?
I'd rather cut their fingers off than rape them. Sorry, no.
Okay, but
I
I'm
don't
saying
feel comfortable
I'm
doing
saying
that.
right. So I'm saying if there was a situation where you were very sure, you had good reason to believe that rape would work, would you try it?
No, I don't think so. No.
Yeah, that's why.
But-
That's why.
Wait,
I was asking, 'cause
try it for my method of torture would
to
be
try
a
and
lot
get
less,
information.
lot more. My form of torture would be a lot more annoying, like playing like bad
They
music
is
for
here.
hours on hours.
Yeah, can I say something?
Put them in a room where there's like a flickering light or something like that.
Can I say
Try
one
to,
thing
like-
real quick?
Go ahead.
I think it's kind of you have to kind of like do a calculation on it's a balance between you torturing and you learning in rehabilitating, and you kind of have to weigh it, because if it's very urgent and there's not much time in how it would affect others in society, then it would be more crucial to probably do what you have to do at that last moment. But if it's not as crucial in where you catch the person, it might be vital in learning what was the factors in that person's life that caused them to do that. Because whether you like it or not, you take them out of society, they were members of society, and there were factors within society that made them cause and effect factors in society that made them do that. And it could be potential cause and effect factors in society that you can look out for in the future to catch a person that's like that, or potentially prevent that from happening again.
Cool.
All right. Well, I think Dog.
I think
was
somebody
asking-
mentioned
Dog-
that earlier,
Dog
that
came in
it.
here.
Go
He
ahead,
was
Dog.
asking. I think he what came in late. He wasn't sure what the hypothetical was.
Yeah, what was the hypothetical?
Really, how far are you willing to go with torture if you are, if you think torture should be used to get the job done? Say there's a nuclear bomb headed to New York City. How far would you go in order to get the information you needed to stop that bomb from dropping?
Well, I mean, if torture proved effective, then, I mean, it would seem irresponsible not to use torture, right? Like, if you think about it, the amount of people who would die from the blast, the amount of people who would suffer like cancer and all of these crazy diseases, the total breakdown of law and order that could potentially take place if it hits like a major power hub in the country.
Yep. So yeah,
right?
all the bad
I
stuff.
mean, so it's like, I mean, you would real. I mean, that's like comparing one rape to like 1,000 rapes, right? And then some, right?
So
it's like
you don't have to give the example. Just would you result to rape if you had good reason to believe that rape would get the information out of the prisoner?
In that situation, yeah.
Okay.
My only problem is if you're dealing with someone that's trained to resist torture, you're probably not going to get the information you want.
Yeah, but in the hypothetical metal, the person is quite sure that rape will work.
If it will work, I guess.
That's
really all that matters in the end. If you somehow know it will work, I guess you can do it. But but for the most part, I would prefer to err on the side of caution and figure out ways where we don't have to do that, unless it's in the most extreme situation, I guess.
So in the most extreme situation, you'd be okay raping for information.
If it's like a nuclear bomb that's going to kill a lot of people, I can understand doing it then.
Hmm.
Not happy about it,
just a room full of turds then, huh, Travis?
But that's the most extreme situation it's going to get. If someone knows they can do a better method, I would rather use that than that.
Never
to me, that's
happy
more
about
like a
raping
last
people.
resort.
Yeah,
It's the last resort there.
Yeah. Okay. It's interesting. I think it's.
And I get the backwards way of like the witch trial of trying to get a person to confess, but like if you convict somebody of being guilty, dragging them out in the middle of the square and doing horrific things to them in front of everybody, it could be a potential deterrent of this could happen to you if you do that. In affecting society, it's like, no, I don't want to be burnt alive and have my guts ripped out, so I probably won't do what that guy did.
Yeah, but they were basically doing it to people that were basically innocent and weren't doing anything to begin with. They were just acting.
I said that's why I distinguished. I said that the notary of like witch trials, or your demon or whatever.
Oh, all right. Sorry.
I'm excluding that. I'm talking about like, this person killed this person and you're going to make a lesson of them by dragging them before the square and just doing horrible things to them.
Well, see, the thing is, the biggest deterrence for crime isn't actually harsher punishment. I mean, you obviously don't want your punishment to be very lax, because then some people might just commit crime because, like in some countries, people commit crime because it's actually the environment in the prisons is actually better than what they would experience like otherwise if they're homeless or something, right? So they actually might commit petty crime to go to prison. But like if you look at American prisons, like American prisons are pretty shit. Like they're like people who have spent a lot of time in like maximum security prisons, or even not even maximum, but like even lesser security prisons will tell you that American prisons are very, very bad compared to the developed world, right? And so like most people wouldn't want to spend any time in an American prison, right? So really the biggest deterrent for crime wouldn't be to make the prisons harsher. It would just be to increase the chances of somebody getting caught, right? If a potential criminal knows that, for example, if you catch him, you're gonna do all this bad shit to him, but the chances of him being caught aren't that high. Most criminals who are probably naturally risk averse, right, are gonna think to themselves, "Oh, I'm not gonna get caught," right? Most criminals do a crime thinking to themselves they're not gonna get caught, right? However, if you had a very light punishment, like a few years behind bars, right, with no hope of parole, let's say 5 years, right, behind bars in just like a prison in the United States. But they knew that the chances of getting caught were like, well above, just like a coin toss, well above, like, there's a very good chance you're going to get caught. Well, most of them wouldn't commit the crime because it's just not worth it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also,
So-
what do you do to those people who are so
That's interesting
disconnected
what
from
you just said.
society? But what do you do with those people who are so disconnected from modern society that they don't even care about the risk? That they're willing to do the crime
Sure.
regardless of what the punishment is?
You're very robotic. I can't hear you.
Oh, I picked
Well,
them up fine.
What Doug
most
said was
people,
interesting.
yeah, well, most people, even like really crazy people, will, they would care about the consequences, and they do go through to certain lengths not to get caught doing the crime. Of course, there are like a very common crime that people might commit where they don't really take into account the consequences is like a crime of passion, right? Because those often happen in the heat of the moment, or if they are premeditated, oftentimes the person is sort of like consumed by like his goal of like vengeance or something like that, right? So in those situations, an effective strategy for preventing those kinds of crimes is to look at the um is just to get that person some kind of assistance before they commit that crime. So like if they have anger management issues or mental health issues, to get them that help before they do anything harmful, right? Not after the fact saying, "Oh, we should have gotten him mental health." If a person is experiencing angry outbursts in the beginning, then
Can I say one thing?
Okay, hold on a
What you're
second,
saying?
though.
I just want to make a quick comment in what he was saying because it was interesting in getting caught. In where some people they make that argument with white collar crimes. It's kind of like the deterrence of other folks. They see what would happen to them because of how crappy the prisons are, and that does help as a deterrence. And you see all these prison episodes of people getting shanked and beat up and stuff. It's like, man, to heck with that. I'm gonna try to avoid that, and you have these cushy prisons and light sentences with the white collar crimes, and some folks are arguing like, man, they should be thrown into those, in harsh prison in harsher sentences of getting of being to pretty much tortured, because the things that they do, it has very damaging effects to society. Probably, I mean, arguably, I think that they should like get harshness.
Wait, who?
White collar criminals, and I kind of agree.
It's like they should get the harshness, probably even more.
Well, again, the
harshness than some people that are in jail because of the
biggest
the damage that they do to society is fucking.
Well, again, the biggest reason why white collar criminals commit crime, is because, again, they just think they're gonna get away with it, right? If the government was a lot more like had systems in place to help them catch white collar criminals, and when they did catch them, to actually enforce the laws, right? So you don't need to put somebody.
He's not violent. All is just all that type of talk, like just slap on the wrist, a slight fine, and the damage that's done, that in how it affects other people's lives. Yeah, they should.
Well, yeah, well, even if you have like a relatively light, I mean, obviously slap on the wrist isn't gonna do anything, but like if it's just like prison time, but not like, even if it's not significant prison time, for a lot of people, like that's enough to deter them from committing those types of crimes.
Like with the '08 crash, a lot of people, they say nothing has done, nobody's like, a lot of people, they just skated,
Yeah.
And
Well, that's a good example. I think
that's effed up.
something like the '08 is a good example of there's a term for this in psychology, like diffusion of responsibility, right? Where everybody's like, well, I didn't really, I mean, yeah, I was doing some like shady shit, but like everybody does shady shit, right? And they feel like, well, if everybody's everybody's successful in this industry is doing that, then it's like, is it really my fault? It's just sort of how the system is operating,
If you're more educated and know what you're doing, you
it's
should
like a
probably
form
get
of
hit harder, as
whataboutism.
I'm concerned, compared to a person that's on a, they're hobo lying face down and just killing their brain on drugs 24/7.
Can you guys still hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go.
All right, before I lose my signal, I just want to say to whomever was talking about to deter crime, this is one thing that I always go back to and I always will go back to because I'm an adamant believer in it. The best way to deter crime is to start by putting more pressure and incentive on parents to raise their kids in such a way to where they're less likely to produce people who will disassociate from modern society and commit crimes in the first place. No, it's not a perfect system. Yes, you have to have some form of law and order, but I feel like from the documentaries I've seen, a lot of the people who wind up doing these crimes are people who either weren't loved as children, who weren't raised, or who were raised in a very violent environment as children. And because that's all they've known, obviously they're going to continue those trends into their adulthood. So if you ask me, that's where we need to start. And then we can talk about what do we do with these people before they commit these crimes. If they're less likely to be put in situations where they want to commit those crimes.
But learning from
then we
them
don't even
makes
have
you
to
do that too.
I couldn't
Learning
agree
from criminals
more,
does that
Aaron.
too.
I couldn't agree more.
I feel like proper parenting and putting pressure on parents would make a lot of situations and a lot of issues about society a lot easier to deal with.
We go about doing that though, because that's been kind of going on for a while now. Parents have
but learning from the criminal does that too.
Philosophical outreach from the government.
I don't know how that would
and
work,
advocation.
That's what
you would have. Just like you have a poet laureate, you would have a philosopher who would set up a philosophy committee for the country, and you're not. It's not about like dumping ideology on your people. It's just about promoting conversations about that consist of interesting moral dilemmas. I think you get ahead of these school shooters this way because they're engaged with in a meaningful way at a younger age and continue to be as they move through school before they get out on their own.
Well, Travis, here's where I would be a bit of a deterrent, I guess, because I would take it a step further and say, I need a license to drive this truck. I have to be trained and certified on how to drive this truck. This truck is a thing that literally does not move unless another force is acted upon it. But you mean to tell me that in a society where we're trying to get people to be less violent and less primal, that any old person can have kids? If you want to have kids, there should be extensive training that you go through while you're pregnant to teach you some things that would make society better, that you can learn about how to raise your damn kids.
Yeah, and we do have the early workings of what you're talking about, in that if we find out or get any indication that someone is causing harm to their child, the government will take them away.
Like, do we really think that do we really think that people who make really poor financial decisions or resort to drugs and alcohol in situations other than the most desperate, do we really think people like that should be having kids? What do you honestly think the outcome is going to be?
So a lot of those people do lose their kids, right?
Fair enough.
Well, see, but the issue is that it's kind of difficult for a state to regulate stuff like that because
it's already being done though, right, dog?
Well,
and maybe the state shouldn't be the one to do it.
To some extent, like you have.
I mean,
parents.
Unfit mothers lose their children all the time, right? Like we have a lot of stats on this.
And also, maybe the state shouldn't be the one to regulate it. Maybe that should be the responsibility of the communities that those kids are going to grow up in and be a part of.
One of my ideas when I was younger, when I kept seeing people trying to blame video games for kids being violent, my idea was like, okay, we need to start educating parents how games work and stuff. And I was thinking like, maybe we should have classes that explain to parents how their devices work and how they can, use their TVs to set up the child safety stuff on it and set up the child safety stuff on their consoles. And you can extend that to giving them parenting tips and stuff like that.
Yeah, the parents.
I don't know why we
Go
don't
ahead,
do
Bruce.
something like that.
Oh, well, I was going to say there are some easy measures that could be taken to avoid two big things. If you wanted to take regulation to a farther extreme, more than 50% of violent crimes happen to people under the influence of alcohol or some substance. So you could eliminate alcohol and substances across the board and eliminate possibly 50% of crime. Also, almost every shooter that we've had has been a user and habitual offenders in those scenarios of school shootings are users of SSRIs, which are prescribed and advocated by state-appointed doctors. So both situations could be solved through state regulation. So banning substances that are causing death, and then also stopping.
One thing about the SSRI.
So both of those are.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, like, we could take that to the extreme as far as regulation is concerned, and eliminate a lot of possible issues with death if you took away any sort of substances that would alter your state. Which is,
I get the general. I get the general sentiment of what you're saying. A lot of the time, when those guys have SSRIs in their system, is because they're currently undergoing treatment to deal with their mental health issues, and of course, sometimes this does not work out.
Oh, and by the way, let's ban alcohol again because that worked so well the first time, right?
Yeah, no. The
banned
answer isn't regulation. The answer is
heroin's
to
bad
provide
in all of
information for people to better parent themselves.
Heroin and all the oxycodones are highly regulated, yet we have more people on heroin and oxycodone abuse than ever before.
Yeah, that's
because they weren't really that well regulated for a while. Like they were regulated, but not correctly. Right.
Well, it's never enough when it comes to government regulation. If you're in favor of it at all, then it's never strong enough until we have people lining up in bread lines for the proper food.
Well, I think that the issue with the OxyContin and stuff like that is that it wasn't merely that the regulations were waxed. It's that these companies were convincing customers, which of course includes like doctors, patients, the government, that the drugs were non-addictive and safe, and the issue is that patients would get addicted on it and then start coming back to the doctor. Like I recently went to the hospital because my I had like an injury with my arm, and like there were a lot of patients who I thought were going in there basically just to get drugs. Like they were just asking the doctor for drugs. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe they are suffering some kind of pain or chronic symptoms, but that's like a big thing with a lot of hospitals where they'll just go in there and be like, "Yo, I just need some like."
Yeah, whenever they prescribe these people opioids, if they can't afford the opioids, they just go to cheaper ones, which is heroin. Street heroin.
Or the point is that even if they're regulated in any way, there's only so much regulation that will make sense. So continuing the regulation road into whatever you would consider parenting regulations or other standards have a road that we're already down. And I don't necessarily agree that adding more stipulations on that fixes the issue. Now, the issue that Travis brought up in like philosophical advocates or whatever that might be is probably more possible than other sorts of heavy-handed regulation around family life.
That's why I offered the school program. It's not like it's not something you have to do. It's just an option there.
Well, the schools, we have schools now that largely, schools do have a number of classes and other sorts of not ideological. That's not the right word. Yes, actually, my wife used to teach some. The parents don't show up. I mean, it's just what happens. They just don't go.
There's a way. That's really disheartening. I think there's a way to keep parents learning and keep parents in school through this outreach program.
Tax credits.
And to whatever level you're going to get engagement, I imagine a place where families can get together and enter their best paragraph for entry to the country outreach, and it's got to be under 400 words or whatever. But this is the answer to the monthly philosophical question, and you can even run a small lottery. Maybe you have your country give away $1 million a month or something for this outreach program, and it will be judged. And it will be judged by your philosophical committee that's been appointed by your country's philosopher.
But see, I don't think that would really do. I honestly don't think that would really do much. I think that the main
You know how much
reason.
people spend money on lotteries?
Well, yeah. Well, no.
Fundamental.
But I'm not disagreeing that you would get participation. I'm saying I'm not actually sure that would actually help.
Dog,
communities.
Imagine this. Imagine all of the terrible school shootings that have happened. Okay? And imagine some of those guys. If they would have been engaging in philosophical, intellectual discourse to some level, not everyone's going to be doing this at a super high level or even a medium level. Some might be just doing it on thinking about an interesting question like the meaning of their life or something. And so they're doing that more often, and it creates a culture of people feeling like they can have interesting philosophical questions with each other, including their family members. And through that, when you start getting people to talk about their moral foundation or how they would talk about morality, and if something starts changing, where maybe someone's going down the roads of cynicism towards something like, oh, I've discovered that there is no intrinsic meaning. That's what I believe now. And that means I can just go get my rocks off by hurting people and maybe even killing people. How about my classmates? Like some kind of conversational interjection may change the fate there.
Okay, Travis, can I add to that real quick? So parents having a class, they're learning basics, like with parenting, but they're also communicating different views, philosophical views amongst each other. And hypothetically, the kid, he would be monitored throughout his time in school, and that parent grade would be that kid result of that kid's outcome. So the kid performs poorly throughout his term. That parent gets a grade based off of that. So this is the result. So you learn this, and we change philosophical views, and then the outcome of the kid. It gives you an F because a kid is a douchebag.
Yeah,
in school.
if you're gonna start letter grading parents, you're gonna get into some crazy, subjective things going on now. And if you go the other way and just promote the conversations, and then you can evaluate the philosophical merits without labeling the parents as an F parent, a D parent, a C parent, like.
Based on the kid.
I think that's going to go haywire, because if the teacher's saying you get a C because your kid is kind of crap, and that person's like, why do you? And the person's like, why do you think they're kind of crap? And then the other person's like, well, they won't draw within the lines. It's like you're gonna get a lot of things that come up that there's going to be a lot of disagreement.
What if he's fighting and he's gets bad grades and he's problematic?
There's already consequences for that, right?
Yeah, suspension and shit.
Yeah,
and that's a way on the parent, right?
Another problem that could arise is that maybe the kid is just not engaged by the school because the school isn't engaging.
There's no consequences for the parent for that.
You kidding me? I have many friends who are like, I really didn't try much, so I didn't get good grades, so I didn't really care.
If your kid keeps getting kicked out, they may have to find a new school for you. Like this is a way on the parents.
Well, see, a lot of children also misbehave because, they're different. I mean, you have to look at the underlying factors, right? The first thing is that, like values, people's values have significantly shifted over time to where, some parents might not really value, like the kind of traditional. I don't want to say like family structure, but because it's not
Well, that's
so
what I
much
was
about
talking about. Yeah.
yeah, it's not so much about structure as it is about like what you say parenting. Like a lot, and I mean, I think this is probably going to be less so in the future, but it's definitely true of like Gen Xers. Like a lot of millennials who were raised by Gen Xers,
Yeah, I was.
basically grew up like on their own. Like their parents really weren't either you had the situation where like parents, like some millennial parents do this now where they're like very overprotective of their children, or you oftentimes have parents who really don't spend that much time with their children,
You
right?
also
And
had Gen
don't
Xer parents that
So
were
how
helicopter
do you
parents.
hold the parents to account if the
well
kid
see
was
the
crappy the
point
way
is
he's doing that?
well see I don't think that that's something that the government can really solve.
It
What the
used to be
government
something that we
what the
did before.
what the government could do is solve like other issues that cause that, right? So for example, um very high wealth inequality, right? Or the fact or just not even inequality but also poverty, right? Just the level, relative poverty level in your country is a could be a big issue because if your parents have to work two jobs, right? Well, that is gonna in turn end up leaving less time for them to spend with the children, and they're gonna be
Yeah, well, you
exhausted,
know
and
what that
so
is.
that's a big issue.
Well,
Um,
the job market was severely thrown out of whack once women got birth control, were able to work, and the job market had double the workers, so now they could charge less wage. The price of goods go up, and now you have to work double. The parents have to work double the amount, or one parent has to work double the amount
well,
to
see,
provide.
Back to the
I don't
kitchen.
think that I don't think that it's because, to my knowledge, it's what women entering the workplace. All that happened was that um they yes they ended up you had an increase in your workforce, but at the same time you also had an increase in demand for goods, and so that actually did end up increasing the wages. So it
The
actually
demand for
ends up
goods went
balancing
down
out.
as the population declined and less kids were being born. At the turn of the century, the average household size was 10 children. The
No, but
demand for goods
our
went down
population. No, but the
in
point
some ways.
is no, but the point is that when women enter the workforce, even though you have an increase in supply of labor, you also have an increase in the demand for goods because now you have an extra person making money in the house, right?
Yes, somewhat, but that doesn't necessarily equate to better child life. You see, like just because we have more economic growth in some ways doesn't necessarily
No,
equate to a better family structure.
I know, but I'm saying that I don't think that the lowering of wages has to do with like women entering the workforce.
It's just multifold. There's definitely some of that. There's also other sorts of there's other sorts of things when it comes to like world trade, immigration, things of that nature, right? That's even before women entering the
Well,
workforce. That changes a number of things, but it doesn't. None of those things help the family structure. They harmed it because people were objectively poor in the United States, turn of the century, even compared to now, with parents at home, and that's not that wasn't leading to like large amounts of inequality at the time. The inequality gap has diminished, but not in some communities. It's actually increased. So what I'm saying, it's multivariate there, but I don't think we can point it to just wealth inequality or poverty is the problem with whatever the crime issue is or the raising of children. There's something else, and I think it
no, but I'm
relates
saying
to
no, but I'm saying
less
that
parents.
having a high level of inequality specifically, right? Um, exacerbates certain pathologies that are already present in society from the get-go, right? So, for example, um, you know, when you have certain communities, so here's an example, right? If you look at wages, right, total compensation, right, which is wages plus other stuff like health and services, stuff like that, has actually gone up, right? Though I think at a slower rate than it has in the past. But it has gone up, right? But the issue is that the cost of housing, insurance, and healthcare has far exceeded, right, what
Yeah, the cost of other
total
goods has gone down in
compensation.
some ways, right? Like the cost of food, for instance, is much lower.
Yeah, total compensation has gone up, but the the cost of living of certain specifically of health insurance, education, and stuff like
Yeah,
that,
industries that are
housing.
highly, yeah, housing, insurance, all industries that are largely controlled by the state.
You don't think more money coming in is good?
Well, not more money coming in isn't necessarily good, depending on the cost and demand. I don't think more money coming in actually equates to better living slash the cost of goods being more affordable. And like Dog was saying, like there are a number of goods or services that are highly expensive, but there are things that make people less poor that are more affordable now. And like I said, for instance, like your basic needs, food, water. Those are cheaper than ever and more readily available than ever. So it's why you don't see people dying of starvation in this country at all, which I think is compared to 100 years ago is a huge win in our country at least.
I just wanted to thank you guys all for joining in the conversation. We're going to head down to the tavern now. It's Tav time. Yeah. Until next time, everyone on YouTube, thanks for stopping by. Be sure to drop a like and consider subscribing. The Pangburn Offensive is our new live stream channel for anything on the offensive side of things. So yeah, make sure you're subbed over here and make sure you're subbed to our main channel, youtube.com/Pangburn. All right. Let art and science inspire.